welcome to reach out to Trisha or myself at any time. I think that covers most of the housekeeping things. If you have any other questions or concerns, the chat window is open. I'll be monitoring that throughout the session. This is the first in a series, a webinar series that we have that is focused specifically on product management approaches and practices, which makes total sense because Trisha Servinen, who is with us today and is our presenter, has over 10 years of experience bringing her passion for understanding and helping humans to delivering digital products. So for today, she's starting out by talking about why we should focus on problems rather than just building solutions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to her.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. So let's just dive right in and get started. So our learning objectives for today are go back one. We want to make sure that we can, by the end of this session, explain why we should focus on problems rather than solutions. We want to be able to explain the difference between a problem and a solution, and then we want to be able to describe how to form customer problems from data. So diving right in, first, let's make sure we all are on the same page about what is the role of a product manager. So there are 3 goals that product managers have. One is research. We need to be able to understand our users and our market. So we're going to go out. And do research and make sure that we can understand our users and our market. We also have to make decisions. So we'll take in lots of info, whether this be from our team, from stakeholders, from our users, and we make decisions about that. So, so we're getting information from a lot of different places and ultimately taking all of that and saying, okay, what are we going to do next? And then team building. We want to make sure that that our team feels empowered and that they feel valued and that they feel productive. Though we may not be necessarily having our teams report to us, it is still up to us as a member of the team to be able to ensure that everyone feels like they are empowered to do the work that they're there to do. And so the approach that we're going to cover today is really going to be able to help you do all 3 of these things. So first, let's define what is a problem, and then we'll define what a solution is. And we'll talk about what the difference between these are. So a problem is a goal or an objective that a user would like to achieve, but they can't. So a goal or objective a user wants to achieve, but can't. So when I was working at a mortgage company many years ago, one of the biggest objections that we got was clients would call in and they would say, so what's your rate? And our mortgage bankers would have to, then tell them the rate and sort of go through that objection with their sales process. And so it was often solved by, we would just be really out and upfront with what our rates were. The problem, of course, was that we didn't always have the lowest rates in town. We competed, sure, but oftentimes other people would undercut prices, as happens out there in the industry. And so when we talked to our clients, what we learned was that they cared about rate because they did want to spend less money. Yes, that is absolutely obvious, and they wanted to pay less each month. But one of the real reasons why they would lead with that is because mortgages are complicated, and people get one every 7 years on average. And so without a ton of experience, they were really relying on their mortgage banker to not rip them off. And going through this process, it's long. It can sometimes cost you application fees, and they didn't want to get ripped off, and they didn't want to ultimately get ripped off in their mortgage. So the problem that our clients were having, not necessarily was that they didn't know the rate, and so we needed to build something to help them know the rate, but rather they didn't know a lot about mortgages, and they had to trust someone that they didn't know to walk them through the process. So it was really about trust. So what's a solution? Well, a solution is a product or a process that can help a user achieve the goal or objective. So in this particular example, what we did was we built a solution that would help build trust and knowledge with our clients. And we wanted them to feel like they were more in control of the process, and that this was really something that they were helping to move forward and not just being told what to do by their mortgage banker. And so with that, we created a mortgage calculator, and it had some additional features in there. But really, it was a simple way for us to be able to get information out there to our clients so that they could feel like they were knowledgeable in this process, like they were moving the process forward along with their mortgage banker. Okay, so how do you discover problems? Well, there are a couple ways that I like to recommend. One are contextual interviews. So contextual interviews are where you are sitting with folks in their natural environment, and you are asking them questions about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And you're really trying to understand their thoughts and emotions around what's going on for them. So you might be sitting with someone in their office and watching them use your application, if it's a business application. And as they make decisions about what to do next, you're going to ask them why. Why are you doing this? Why did you do this? What are you thinking about as this is happening? And versus an observation where you might go out and watch people in their natural environment, and most likely they're not knowing that they are being watched. And you really wanted to see how they behave without being influenced by having somebody watch them. So a great example of this is if you really want to understand what folks are doing and what their behaviors are when it comes to riding the bus, you might go stand at bus stops and just watch people, how they get on the bus. And then you might go on the bus and watch and sit up front and maybe watch folks, how they behave in that way while they're paying their fares and that sort of thing. And so they're not really knowing that you're watching, but you're able to get information in. And so we're going to cover a lot of these. We're going to cover a lot more about contextual interviews and talking to people in our next webinar. So definitely want to sign up for that. But the key takeaway from this is that we're really not asking people what they want or what they think their problem is. What we are doing is we're asking folks what is going on for them at this time. And we're really trying to understand their behavior. So it's also not asking your sales team or your CS team or your CEO to tell you what people want. It's really about asking them why they're behaving, why they are, and then bringing that information back to your team and letting your team use the collective knowledge that they have to come up with solutions. And the thing is that people, if you were to ask them what they wanted, people will often talk in solutions. And it's just how people approach the world, even if they think they're presenting a problem. So let's go through some examples. So some solutions might be saying something like, well, Maria wants to take a picture, or Maria can't create calendar appointments, or she can't pay her bills online. And so what are the options that we have? If those were the problems that were presented to us, if that was all we went on, well then, okay, we would add a camera, or we might add an appointment creation feature some way, letting her create appointments, or we might add bill pay. It's not really getting to the core, though, of what is really going on for her and why she might be asking for those things. And so if we dig in a bit more and we thought about what her problems might be, in that she wants to preserve memories of her life, we have a lot more options, right? We could maybe create something with video, or we could give her a diary, or a plethora of other options to let her preserve memories. Or if she can't get to places on time, we could simply give her a list where she could write down where she needs to be, or just send her alerts rather than going through the whole idea of creating calendar appointments. Or maybe we call her and say, hey, you need to be in this place. And so getting deep down into what a problem, what problems our users have is really core to being able to make sure that we're building the right thing. And so how do we do this? There are lots of different methodologies that folks will that folks will tell you, and all of them are probably right. The simplest way that you can get started today is by asking 5 whys. And I encourage you to do this throughout your life, not just when you're talking to users. So when you're talking to your stakeholders and your bosses and folks that you work with on a regular basis, because that's how you can start to learn and become much more comfortable with this. So let's go through this right now. So if someone comes to us and they say, Maria can't create calendar appointments. Okay, so Maria can't create calendar appointments. Well, why does she need to? Well, they might answer, because she has to start making sure that she makes it to her meetings on time. Okay, cool. So why is she so focused on this? Well, Maria often gets to meetings late. Okay, well, why does she struggle with this so much? Well, as it turns out, Maria gets really caught up in what she's doing and forgets that she committed to a certain time. Well, why does this happen to her? What is special about Maria? Why does this keep happening? Well, because she doesn't keep track of her time commitments. Well, why not? Well, because she thinks that she's good at remembering. She thinks she's good at remembering, and she really won't admit to herself and to others that she gets really focused on what she's doing and she needs to be more adamantly interrupted. And so when we get to that answer, when we get to the fact that she's really not that great at remembering things and that she gets super hyper focused on things, it becomes much more about interrupting her than it does about creating calendar appointments. And so our solution that we might create becomes much broader and it becomes much more helpful, which means Maria is going to keep coming back to our product because we've actually helped to solve her problem rather than just giving her the solution that has come to mind. And so why should we work to solve problems rather than solutions? And this really comes down to sort of what we were just talking about, is that the reality is that people will often think in context. So they think about things, they talk about the issues that they're having within the environment that they're used to. So they're aware of calendars existing. And so they think, oh, well, that sort of helped me. And your product sort of helps me. So I'd really like to be able to do this with your product. And they think that that might be the way to solve the problem. And the issue is that you're then stuck with just their version of what might solve the problem. And you have this sample of one. And so if you're talking to lots of other people and you're really digging in to what problem these folks are having, you might be able to take this and make it more than just a sample of one because you're really digging into what's going on underneath for them. The other thing is that people will often assume what they need and that they know all the possibilities that are available. And so they make these assumptions that they know what's best for them and that they know exactly how to solve it. And they're not often aware of what's really going on internally for them. People will often, it's not necessarily lie to themselves, but people will often sort of hide the things that might make them uncomfortable. And so they'll assume that they know exactly what they need and exactly what they want. And finally, the last really compelling reason about why we should really focus on problems rather than solutions is that the more that we know about our users, the more innovative solutions and ideas that we can come up with. And so product development is really about learning, and it's really about learning about our users and our business and all the folks around us. And by digging in and asking why, we have a lot bigger opportunity to really learn and understand. And going back to the very first thing we talked about, to make better decisions. And that's really what we're here for. The key is that we really want to make sure that we work to understand our users' problems. So one of the most overused quotes in product development, and yet here I am I'm throwing it out there, I'm going to say it anyway, is if I had asked them what they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster horse. And that of course, is the quote by Henry Ford. And it's often misunderstood that when talking to users, we should ask them what they want. And so we don't want to ask them what they want. What we want to do is we want to observe their behavior and ask them why they behave that way. Because our best solutions, and maybe it's the Model T or the assembly line like that, really come from our teams that truly understand our problems and really truly understand the problems that are worth solving. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Trisha. A couple of things that really resonated with me when you were talking is looking at the 5 whys, and what a problem really is that it's often more on the emotional needs side than the physical action side. And I think that's a great delineator, right? You know, if somebody's saying, I want to make a phone call, that's a physical action. But I think that might be a good indicator that we're talking about a solution, where I need to call my dad because I need to make sure he's okay, is more amorphous, but it's really more of the need. And like you were saying, opens up those possibilities to doing things different ways and coming up with a truly innovative solution. And like somebody said in the chat window, it is very much connected with the lean startup method. So
yeah. And one of the things we talk about in product coaching, here at Globant, we offer product coaching to where we can come out and sort of teach some of these philosophies, I suppose. And one of the things we talk about is motivations and really learning and understanding folks' motivations. And so you can, if you go to Wikipedia and look up, I think it's motivations is I think the actual Wikipedia article, you'll see that there's a list of, like, halfway down the page, there's a list of all these motivating factors. And what's remarkable is that we don't often think about those things. We don't often, it doesn't come up for us on a normal basis, but those are in fact the things that drive us to create and take action throughout the day. We were chatting yesterday and we were talking about, so imagine that you're walking down the street and you see a sign that says sidewalk closed ahead. You don't think about necessarily how to get around, or why that sidewalk is closed, and you don't necessarily think about that sign being there and whether it's the right sign and giving you the information. You're really trying to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to get across the street, right? Because you need to get to where you need to go. That's really your motivating factor, is getting to where you need to go. And so thinking about those types of things and really digging in is where we can really start to, like we said several times now, create really awesome solutions.
Awesome. So one question that I have is, there are other people in the organization who do what is called research, right? And it's been pointed out that this is similar to customer development. It's got some things in common with research. How do you see it interacting with those particular disciplines?
Sure. Yeah. So I love when research folks are on my team because that means that they can totally lead the customer research portion, which is awesome because they certainly are way more skilled at it and focused on it. So please, all of you research folks, join the team. The difference between product management and research is really that when the research folks are there, when we have the luxury of having a research person, we need to make sure we're there to observe and that we're there to take in the information, and that we can then use that information later. Because the thing about the research folks is that they're most likely not in the big stakeholder meetings, or they're maybe not talking to the development team on a daily basis. Whereas product management is really at the center of users and our business folks and our development folks, and that includes design and QA and our developers. And so we need to be able to take in all of that information to make really great decisions. And so we need to be a part of research, and we need to be able to ask good questions of our researchers and talk to them about what's going on. We need to be able to potentially participate in the research to make sure we're getting back what we need to be able to make decisions, and to really guide our development team towards creating a product and giving them a vision that makes sense. And being a part of that is really key.
Awesome. Well, we've had some great questions come in. One that I think that we've talked about before, because it's kind of a sticky wicket, is, sometimes ideas are brought to us and they're brought by sponsors who already say, no, I know what I want. This is what we're moving forward. So if we really want to take this approach of focusing on the problem rather than the solution, how do we handle that situation?
Sure. So one of the things when I'm teaching that comes up over and over and over again is that in product management, it depends. It really depends on a lot of different factors. The biggest thing to understand is that we're working with people. People are involved in this entire process. So there are users, our stakeholders, and our team. And so really understanding people is one of the core parts of our job. And so when folks come to us and they're like, I want this thing, to really understand what's motivating them, you have to know about them and learn about them. And so asking them questions. Okay, well, it might be going back to those 5 whys and asking them about why that product is great, or it might be why they think that product is great and asking them, or why that idea is great. And so really digging into those whys and getting and asking that question as many times as you can. And so there are going to be some people out there who do not respond to that in any way. They stick their heels in the ground and they're like, stop asking me why. Just do the thing that I said. Yes, those people exist. Absolutely. And so there are a couple other techniques that you can do out there, which is you might be able to build something super, super cheap that, and when I say cheap, I don't necessarily mean cheap in dollars. Sometimes it means cheap in code, or it means like doing a paper prototype or something of that nature. Build something super cheap, get it out there and learn. And if you're going to go down that route and going to go down that path, then the thing that you need to make sure that you do is that you can track it and that you can measure whether or not it succeeds, because you can then take that information and you can bring that back to your team. I was working one time with a stakeholder who they really, really, really wanted us to integrate with this other product inside of our product. Like, it was something that they were super passionate about. And no matter how many times I had asked them why and talked through it with them, it was not changing at all. And we were going out and we were talking to some users, and we were doing this anyway. And so what we did was we ended up taking that product that our stakeholder had wanted to integrate with, and we ran users through it. It wasn't our product, but we just did a little bit of a usability test on it. And as it turns out, our users could not use it. They were so frustrated, and they struggled all the way through. And so we were able to take that information back to our stakeholder and show them compelling reasons about why we shouldn't move forward with that particular integration. And of our interview I think was about an hour and a half to 2 hours, which with each user. We had a bunch of other stuff to do in those interviews. This took up about 20 minutes, so a pretty small portion, considering to be able to get the answer and bring it back to our stakeholders.
Nice. So more of that understanding human behavior at the stakeholder level as well as at the customer level.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So another question came up, which is this type of approach and investigation of understanding the problem limited to a certain phase of product development? I think that it's natural to associate it with the discovery phase, right? When we're building a new product. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, is there a time where it's not appropriate to think about the problem?
So again, it depends. It really, I think that we always need to be thinking about problems. So full stop, we always need to be thinking about problems that our users are having and try and solve for problems rather than simply building a solution for the sake of building a solution because we want to. That said, there are times within the development cycle where we may realize that we didn't know enough and we didn't dig in enough and into asking our users why or asking our stakeholders why, and we're far along within this development cycle, and that is where we really need to decide, okay, does it make sense to continue and succumb to the sunk cost fallacy that going forward is and continuing down this path and getting it out there is better than stopping, like full stop and saying, let's pivot and do something different. And so it's really figuring out what, again, is the cheapest way to learn something. So is it that you continue to develop for some short period of time so that you can just get it out there and you can see how users react to it and get some data? Or is it that you stop, go do some research for a week so you can learn enough to make some small tweaks to what you have, or to stop completely and really just pivot, throw it away, do something different? And so that really depends a lot on your business, on the project, and again, how far along you are in that project and what it means to stop, and what it means financially, and what it means to team morale, and what it means to your success, frankly, as a product manager.
Nice. I'm scrolling through the questions now. We're getting quite a few, so pardon me while I move through. Some interesting questions about product management in general. So, yeah, like there's a really good one that I would actually like to touch on before we get to that, though, which is about changing a team's mindset, because I know this is something you and I talk about a lot, and I think you've touched on it a bit in some of your answers already, but something that I think, and again, we have conversations about this stuff all the time. So I know that we've had conversations about the importance of bringing other people along with you, but also some of the challenges in that. So what have you found to be successful in helping to bring your team along with you if you find yourself on a team that maybe has been super focused on delivery and solutions and features, to really get them to help think about the whole product and approaching it from this perspective?
I think it really comes back to probably the example that I gave with talking about stakeholders. It's really about letting them see for themselves. So it might be inviting your development team to come along for some of the user interviews that you're doing. There's absolutely no reason why they can't be a part of that. They may not ask questions. It may just be that they're observing what's going on, but really seeing what people say, and that they are in fact frustrated with a product is super compelling. It may be letting them build something cheaply, and not asking them to commit to something, commit to this time frame to get these things out, and always focus on delivering something very specific to the market, and instead letting them try something new for a short period of time. I think in Scrum they call that a spike. And so it's really about letting people bring their collective knowledge to the team, and really helping them to feel empowered to come up with different solutions. And so as product managers, what I found as a product manager, what I found is that when I come to a team with a solution, that is when they feel really like they don't want to play along and they don't really want to participate. And so if I come to them and I say, you know what, our users, they're having this problem. And I say, help me figure out how to solve this. That is when I will often get way more buy-in from my team, because then they're the geniuses, as they are, that get to come up with all of these great innovative solutions that, are things that I've never thought of, and that I couldn't possibly think of because they're in it every day, in the technology and in the design and really learning.
Awesome. So to go to those, sorry, I'm distracted. Somebody raised their hand and I see you. But just to go to that broader question, which I think is a great one, especially with, we've talked a lot about even what is a product manager? And there are lots of other disciplines that are related or connected or potentially on the path, like business analyst is a big one. Mm-hmm. And, I think historically, especially in software, product managers have come from a lot of different parts of the organization. So what would you say a product manager is, and what are some of the key skills that they bring to this role?
That's a big question. So what is a product manager? Well, that really goes back to, let's just go right back here. So there's someone who, again, we understand our users and our market. We make decisions, and then we help our team to feel empowered, valued, and productive. Okay, so cool. That seems really, really great and really ethereal. So what do we do? What do we physically do? A lot of it comes down to listening. We are literally listening and taking in information. So I know that doesn't necessarily seem very tactical, but listening is in fact extremely tactical, because you need to talk to your stakeholders and hear them and ask them why and what their motivations are, and really understanding their behavior so that you can guide your team, so that you can then give information back to your team that says, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is important. And talking to users and the same thing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we are responsible for is making decisions. And it's not coming up with ideas. That is absolutely not what our role is. Our role is to take all that information in and then decide, oh, we should move forward. And sometimes that information is recommendations on what we should do, because we're not coming up with all of it. So what else do we do? Yeah, sometimes we write user stories, or we might make a journey map, or we might do a competitive analysis. That, again, is all a conduit to us being able to make decisions. And so there are lots of tools in our toolkit that we can use to get to the point of where we make decisions. Does that answer the question?
I thought it was a great answer. We'll see what people have to say in the chat window. Because there were additional questions that came up about the separation of product between product manager and project manager, and how technologically involved does the product manager have to be. And again, sure, we've had these conversations. I think that as the person that focuses on the decisions and the problem, that the answer to that is it depends. Right? Mm-hmm. It depends on what the team needs and what you need to make those decisions to move forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, so project managers notoriously are responsible for budget, timeline, resources, communication about budget, timeline, and resources. And so as product managers, we need to communicate about other things, and we need to measure success, and we need to talk about problems and how technical we are. As you absolutely just said, Christy, I think the key are the problems that you're talking about, are they super technical? If you don't know the information like that your users are talking about, are you going to be so completely lost that you can't move forward without having somebody there to help you along? Okay, maybe you should be a bit more technical. Do you need to know how to code? No, I don't. I am adamantly against the fact that product managers might need to code or even know SQL. I don't think that we need to do that to be able to understand problems and make decisions.
Absolutely. And I think that you and I have talked also about the different paths that people take to becoming product managers. I was a games producer and I worked in the lab, and a lot of, well, you just did it, right? You just started doing it.
Yeah. My boss was like, we should build an app. And I said, I'll do it. And that is how I became a product manager.
I love it. And I think that that's not uncommon
No, not at all.
Yeah. So many people. I met somebody who has a master's in social psychology. So she came to it from academic research, but has been able to apply those skills across the board. What are some of your go-to tools and tool sets that you use? And since we're speaking specifically about identifying problems, right? The 5 whys is a great one. Are there any resources that you recommend to help dive into more of the nuances of that? Are there other approaches that people could take, especially if they don't have a research team to help them?
Well, I don't think you need a research team to be able to ask the 5 whys. And that's why I was saying that I think that folks should practice this on a normal basis. Being curious has served me better than any other learning that I have ever had in my career. And so constantly being able to ask questions and listen more than talking, I think is honestly one of our greatest tool sets in product management. There are lots of other ways that we can present out information, whether it be working through a lean canvas, or whether it be doing things like a competitive analysis where we go out and actually get hard quantitative data that can help us, or looking at analytics in Google Analytics or any of the other platforms. And those can help guide us on where we might look for problems. But it's not going to get us to the real root of what's going on without talking to users and asking them why, to really understand their behavior. And the thing is that you don't have to have a research team to go and talk to users. You can go up to Starbucks and talk to some folks in line and ask them about, why they use their phone in the way they do, or why they're paying in this way. And you certainly don't have to only ask questions about your products. You can ask questions about competing products in the market and understand why folks are doing those things. And so you can talk to anyone who might fit your target market and simply ask them why, and use it as a conduit to sort of getting to the heart of the matter. And that way, when you're really getting in front of users, your actual users, and maybe with your research team, you'll have more succinct questions and a more succinct idea of where you might go with those questions. But I don't think that you need a research team to be able to talk to users. There's an old adage, I think Steve Blank said in his book, which is get out of the building. I wholeheartedly agree. Get out of the building, talk to people.
Yes. Sometimes we don't realize how insular our vision has become. And literally just by going out of the building, just looking around outside can provide us with just that shift in perspective to get our brains going in a different way. And I know we're definitely going to get more into that in the next webinar in the series. So I don't want to go too far on that, because it is also a topic very close to my heart as well. So I know that I can dive deep into that. One last question.
Okay.
Which is, it's kind of a combination question. 2 things that product managers are very often responsible for are vision and prioritization. So especially, for example, say I go out and I talk to all these customers and I have this list of needs that I've identified, and maybe it's 10 to 15 needs. how do I use that to inform those other things that people generally expect of me as a product manager?
Okay, what do you mean by those other things that?
The vision and the prioritization are specifically what have come up in the questions.
Okay.
You know, because a lot of times you'll hear the product manager owns the vision and sets the roadmap, and you know, and that I think can sometimes lead to that solution thinking, right? If I own the vision for this product, then I need to be able to talk about it in detail, and yeah, and that can sometimes lead away from lead to solution thinking rather than problem thinking. And then, of course, prioritization. If you have all of these problems, how do you pick the first one to start on?
Sure. So I think the answer to the question is really about getting outside of the sort of the buzzwords and the buzz phrases, I guess, that we're used to hearing as product managers, like that we're the CEO of the product. Which he is the gentleman who wrote that has even said that. Don't say that anymore. But it's really getting outside of all of those things and realizing what we are here to do is to help our team move forward. So it's about helping our team come up with a solution. And so what does our team need to be able to come up with a solution? And I think, and I think you, Christy, think this too, which is they really need to understand what problem they're solving to be able to come up with a solution to frankly solve that problem. And so I don't like the word prioritization. Everybody has their own priorities and it's based on their own motivating factors, right? Like I might want to get promoted or get a raise or something like that. And our users, they want to be able to do this thing. And our stakeholders might want to earn more revenue or they might want to get a raise. And so everybody has like their own personal motivating factors, which cause them to choose different priorities. And so I like to use the word ordering. It's really about ordering the work that we're doing because everything's a priority to someone. And so how do you choose which one to do first? There's a lot of different things, and this I think comes from experience, being able to really make this decision. And there are tools that will help you get experience, but the key is you need to look at, okay, are there dependencies? Are there actual technical dependencies that if I don't do this thing, it is impossible for me to do this other thing? It is literally, genuinely impossible for me to move forward and do this thing. Okay, so then you might do this other thing first. Or which one's the riskiest? Meaning if you haven't tested this thing out or you haven't proved that this particular problem is real, you haven't put something out there into the world and gotten data back about it being true, the whole rest of what you're working on is sort of a house of cards and will fall. And so I think, like I said, it really comes from experience, and the way you get experience is by doing it, which means how do you do it so you get enough experience to move forward? It means you need to release. And it doesn't mean release full-fledged real products out there into market all the time. It means putting things in front of users and getting data back. And so it might be something small and it might be something cheap, but it's putting something out there and releasing and getting data back. But the more we stay insular and just build, the more it all becomes about our own opinions and our own motivating factors about things to move forward. And we really need to make sure that we're moving forward with our users' motivating factors and solving their problems.
Awesome. Well, that takes our time. So I really want to say thank you to everybody who posted questions. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get to all of them. Some of them were honestly a little bit outside of my purview. I think there's some great questions about Globant and where we're going internally that I just don't have the answer to right now, but I am putting Trish's and my email addresses in the chat window. It's Christy.Stone and Trisha.Servinen@Globant.com. If you have any other questions and want to reach out to us, we are more than happy to connect. It's what we love to do. We love people, obviously, or we wouldn't be in this role. As Trisha alluded to a lot of product management just has to do with dealing with people and making decisions, which can probably be said of a lot of roles, but I think that standing at the intersection of the customer, the development team, and the business, we really get it from all angles. So for everybody who is inspired to be a product manager or to learn more about this kind of approach, we welcome your feedback and comments. We would also love to see you at our next webinar, which is on February 28th at the same time, making the most of user interviews. So that's going to be more of a conversation between Trisha and I about one of our favorite topics, which is how do we talk to people and really understand them. So once again, thank you everybody for spending some time this Wednesday morning with us. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you again soon.